So you've written two very different books, and they're both about your family history. The first one is Open Book, and the next is Where Are the Grown-Ups? They're both very different. Tell us about them and how they came to be.
Okay. Open Book was a project where I wanted to interview my father about his life. He was in his 80s, and he was in a good frame of mind to look back at some of the things that had shaped his life, some of the events he remembered, and I wanted to capture that in his voice. So he's telling his own story. I just typed up what he said and put it into a format for friends and family to read. Very different from Where Are the Grown-Ups? This was a project really that I started writing after my mother died. It's a family memoir, and it covers 3 generations of my mother's family. So I'm talking about myself in this book, and my mother and my grandmother Rose. And they were very different books because they were for different audiences, really. Where Are the Grown-Ups? At the heart of that story there's a tragedy which wasn't really examined in my mother's lifetime. So I had some research to do to try and find out the facts around that, and to write it in such a way that the reader would be intrigued to find out what was going on in these people's lives to make them who they were. So I had a very clear storyline, and I found really that I got to the emotional heart of the story through historical documents, by looking at marriage certificates, by looking at death certificates. I had a straight storyline that I could then follow. So the facts really inspired my imagination, I think.
You uncovered things that you didn't know.
I uncovered things that my mother didn't know, and it's a bit of a sadness to me that I can't share those things with her. But I really feel that in writing that book, I've done what I think is a service to my grandmother, who had a very short life. And there's a little poem on her gravestone which promises she won't be forgotten. And now I've released this book to the world, and the world knows about her story. I feel I've done something valuable for myself and for her.
So let's say someone wants to write a book about their own family history. Where should they start?
The first thing is, who are they writing it for? Are they writing for family and friends, for the material to be passed along within their own family through the generations? Or are they thinking about writing for a wider audience of people that don't know their family necessarily, but might be interested in the story? You also need to think about who you're writing about, because if you're someone that's interested in your family history, you've probably got a lot of information about a lot of different people, and it's not a very sensible idea to try and write about them all in one book. So be selective and focus on the era that interests you, the people or the person that fascinates you the most, and concentrate on those. It's really a process of selection.
So aside from the writing itself, is there anything else a writer can do that will help their project in general?
I would recommend that you read as much as possible, which sounds a bit of a contradiction if you're trying to write, but you will learn so much from reading other people's memoirs and family history. And also the books about the craft of writing as well will also help you. I think the thing that's quite important when you're trying to bring your ancestors to life is to borrow a few tricks from the fiction writers' box of tools. And they use scenes and dialogue to bring their characters to life. And that's what you're really doing when you're writing about your family as well. They are the characters, and we need to, as readers, engage with them and see them living and breathing in their own world. And the only way you can do that really is to put them into scenes and have them talking to other people, so we see their reactions and the challenges that they're facing.
What resources are available for aspiring writers?
There's a lot of books out there that you can refer to, a lot of online resources. But I think one of the most helpful things I found was joining a writers group. There's a point in your writing where you'll really begin to wonder whether what you're writing is worthwhile, whether it's interesting, whether it's any good. And the only way you can really know about that is to do some market research. And if you belong to a writers group and you can share your work with other people, they will soon tell you how you can improve your work, how you can make it better if it's interesting, what you need to do to make it engaging for the reader so they want to read to the end. That's the most helpful thing I think you can do, is to really share your work, but not with your family and friends, because they'll just tell you everything's brilliant.
Yeah.
And that's not what you need to hear.
And finally, some exercises that you would recommend writers to use in the process.
If you're writing a family memoir and you're bringing yourself into it, you need to prompt your own memory, really. Because if you prompt your own memory and think about the events that shaped your life, those are really the things you need to be thinking about when you're writing about your ancestors, the key events that made them who they are. So if you think about the key events in your life that made you who you are, can you collect, say, 3 of those and write down what they are and your feelings about them at the time? Now, they're going to be different for everybody, but if you do that successfully, perhaps try and look at your ancestors and pick out 3 events that you think might have shaped your main character's life and made them who they are. What would they be? And if those come easily to you, can you start drafting a scene where we see one of your characters facing one of those challenges, so we know what the key event was that made them who they are? The other thing I found helpful was to think about my childhood home in my mind and actually walk through each room in your childhood home and notice the objects in the room. Think about the materials, the colours, the textures, the light, and then focus on one object that means something to you.
So you're picking up something that is sort of a trigger that has a story attached to it.
Yes, indeed. Those are the things that will trigger your memory, make you recall things that you thought you'd forgotten. And in doing that, if you're thinking about things that you've forgotten, try and access the feelings you had at the time. It's a good idea to think about something in your childhood that had a big emotional impact on you, and try writing about it from your viewpoint now, looking back, and then write the same scene from your viewpoint as a child, as you experienced it at that time. And then read both those scenes back to you, and which one is the most effective? I've got a feeling it's going to be the childhood experience, but see what you think.
And how do you recreate a time that you didn't live? You know, how do you because you had journalistic background, so that fed quite well into recreating a time that that you couldn't access. So what's the process there?
I think for people who are interested in their ancestry and genealogy, this is where your research is so important. You may not be using everything you know about a certain period of time that you didn't live through, but it's important that you do the research so that you can write credibly and introduce in a subtle way historical context to your work, so that readers understand that this is a different time and they have a feeling about what that time meant. And bringing in things like news headlines, fashions, brand names, the household objects and routines that people had at that time. Those are the things that will bring your writing alive and make your research have so much meaning. Looking at old newspapers, you can place yourself in time by looking at some of those historical documents.
Amazing. So how do people connect with you and find out more about the books?
Okay, Where Are the Grown-Ups is available on Amazon. It's in paperback and Kindle format. If you've got any questions, you can contact me through Twitter. I'm at Ruth Badley PR on Twitter. Where Are the Grown-Ups has a Facebook page and you can connect with me there. There's also going to be a handout to run alongside this video in which I give you my suggested reading for writing craft and also some fantastic family memoirs that will teach you so much about how to create impact in your writing, and you can see how other writers have done that and hopefully use some of their tips and tricks in your own work.
Brilliant.